Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church on Pride Day in Salt Lake City. You know, I think there ought to be a documentary on Pride in Salt Lake City, so we can announce to the world, this is the place right here. The Pride Parade, as fun and crazy and zany as it might be, originated from a bleak and sorrowful experience, 1969, when a riot broke out at the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay club in Greenwich Village. Now, historically, the police had always raided that club from time to time, but on June 28, 1969, the patrons fought back. A year later, in 1970, the first Pride March was held to commemorate the anniversary of the Stonewall riot. Commemorative marches in other cities began to spring up, starting with Los Angeles. It took audacity and courage to march in public in those years, hard for us to imagine today. But now these marches are pure celebration, demonstrating pride in being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and the tent has been open to all allies and supporters who join in the fun and excitement generated by a struggle for liberation, restoring human rights and civil rights for everyone, moving towards the realization that love exists in and of itself, with no restrictions, no judgments. Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, and here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. Can we open our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 123. As was demonstrated a few days ago on a light rail in Portland, hatred is such a powerful force that it can transform people into killers. Hatred can escalate to the point of no return, where there's no longer a filter nor any mechanism to control a savage instinct to murder another human being who stands outside your tribe. Rage at those who are different blinds a person to the point where their own humanity is obliterated. They become an instrument of such irrational bitterness that murder is justified by their own sense of their own reigning superiority. The targets of such hatred are widespread. It could be African Americans in a prayer group in a church. It could be Matthew Shepard. It could be a woman in wearing a hijab. The first and most fundamental lesson that everyone needs to be taught, from preschool on up through high school and beyond, a lesson that's reiterated every year, pertains to a common humanity. So in our prayer this morning, let us imagine what that lesson, that singular lesson, might look like. The human race is a vast rainbow: black, red, brown, yellow, white. And yet for all, blood is red, the sky is blue, the earth is brown, the night dark. In size and shape, we are a varied pattern of tall and short, slim and stout, elegant and plain. Yet for all there are fingers to touch, hearts to break, eyes to cry, ears to hear, mouths to speak. Boundaries divide us, lines drawn to mark our diversity, maps charted to separate the human race from itself. And yet a mother's grief, a father's love, a child's happy cry, a musician's sound, an artist's stroke, batter the boundaries and just shatter the walls. Strength and weakness, arrogance and humility, confidence and fear live together in each and every one, reminding us that we share a common humanity. It was about 15 years ago when our church hosted a district-wide high school youth conference. The theme revolved around owning responsibility in all relationships, particularly sexual relationships. All I can say is I didn't pick the theme, but I was drafted to help facilitate some group discussions. At one point in the program, I was going to lead a group of just guys, and another woman minister took the young women off for their own discussion. There were about 40 youth in attendance, pretty evenly divided between male and female. So we got to the point where the kids were instructed that the boys were to go to this room and the girls were to go to that room. Sean Dennison, the transgender minister of South Valley UU Society, interjected, "If you're not sure in which group you belong, come with me." Now, that was not part of the planning session, I assure you. I was initially irritated, not so much that Sean had imposed this newly improvised option, but I thought that gender clarity was pretty much settled by the time one got to high school. I fully recognize that many kids, even before reaching high school, were confident in their sexual orientation and would identify with either being gay or lesbian, bi, straight, whatever. But I did assume that all kids would have no trouble identifying their gender by the time they reached puberty. When we broke into our respective groups, 3 high school kids followed Sean for their own private discussion. 3 kids out of 40 wanted to at least discuss certain ambiguities about their gender identification. Wow, that was stunning. For me, it was as though the center of gravity had shifted. I was wondering if I was living in another universe. Sexual norms were changing, and nobody bothered to tell me. Having grown up in an art and theater environment, it was always easy for me to take a progressive position on gay and lesbian life. Scrutinizing gender, however, was never on the radar. It feels a lot like watching social norms change in slow motion. Just a couple of weeks ago, when we had a TED Talk discussion on how we can communicate better with people unlike ourselves, our facilitator had us write our name tag a little differently. We had to write down our name and also by which pronoun we wanted to go by. Well, I stood in the background and observed as people, many of them my generation, wrote down their names, and then they looked absolutely startled and perplexed by having to jot down their preferred pronoun. There was discomfort, a lot of looking around, as in, what the hell is going on here? It never became a point of discussion because gender was not the topic. But it certainly opened the eyes of everyone attending that a new normal was unfolding right before our very eyes. And if we still wanted to consider ourselves progressive people, well, we better hurry up and get with the program. You know, it's not that easy, as though all we need to do is acknowledge transgender as a human right and protest all state legislatures that have bathroom fixations about where transgender people need to go in order to relieve themselves. The changes taking place now are less about trans and more about sexual ambiguity, although trans is also an important factor. A case in point may be the British artist, writer, and media personality, Grayson Perry. He sports a page boy haircut, which makes his gender less obvious, and he's devoted to making masculinity less toxic. He's a cross-dresser who grew up loving James Bond novels and drives a motorcycle wearing a leather jacket. He's married to a woman and has a daughter, and when he's wearing a dress, he will use the men's bathroom because he says the lines are shorter. Why is that, he asks? Because most of the architects were men. He refers to current societal changes as, and I quote, the crumbling superdome of masculinity. What an image, the crumbling superdome of masculinity. He writes, we need to get a philosophical fingernail under the edge of the firmly stuck down masculinity sticker so we can get a hold of it and rip it off. Beneath the sticker, men are naked and vulnerable, even human. Now, clearly defined gender, let alone gender roles, is being obliterated in the fast-evolving world trying to peel off the masculinity sticker. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the trends in comic books over the last year or so, but if comic book superheroes are any indication of a new society taking shape, we gain a lot of insight into the new narratives where Batgirl has a friend who is not only transgendered, but she marries a girl named Jo. Spider-Man attends a gay wedding, and Wonder Woman, if you didn't catch the latest issue, Wonder Woman actually officiates a lesbian wedding. As far as I know, there have been no tweets from the White House on this matter. But it sure is a refreshing change from the hate, bullying, and intimidation from angry white men who support the president. Our hope for the future actually lies in blurring gender distinctions. And despite whatever is happening today politically, the future looks brighter every day. What was once a staple of the traditional family, story hour at the public library, has taken new forms and shapes in several libraries all across New York City. In one library in Brooklyn, the storyteller stands well over 6 feet, aided by 6-inch heels on purple patent leather boots. This reader wears a bodysuit and a purple tutu. A tuft of fuchsia hair can be seen from under a spandex headdress. We have entered the age of drag queen story hour. The kids love it. It started in San Francisco. Quite recently, New York has had to hire a drag queen story hour coordinator because it's just too big. Why does it work so well? Because children and drag queens are a natural pairing. Children love dressing up and being imaginative in what they wear. And kids see drag queens as people who are doing the same thing, expressing themselves creatively and having fun with it. And kids, and we're talking pre-K, have a lot more fluid understanding of gender than most adults. One storytime favorite is a book called Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress. It sparks quite a debate in the story hour led by storyteller Harmonica Sunbeam. The book is about a boy named Morris who wears a beloved dress to school every day. At one point, his friends inform him that he isn't allowed to play on their imaginary spaceship because astronauts can't wear dresses. Well, some kids in the story hour yell, yes, they can. And others in the story hour scream out, no, boys can't wear dresses. And in the midst of the debate, Harmonica Sunbeam quiets the kids and asks in a whisper, has anyone ever said anything mean to you? And some faint yeses are audible. And she says, sometimes it happens. She also leads discussions about what you do when you see someone who is different. When Ms. Sunbeam was asked by a reporter to pinpoint the main difference between story time and an evening drag show, she said, I'm sober. Now, we may think that neither San Francisco nor New York are exactly representative of American society tilting towards gender ambiguity. But let's add to that the city of Beijing, where the youth culture in China is rejecting traditional gender norms and is moving towards ambiguity. The leading boys band in China, replete with choreography that includes crotch grabbing, is made up entirely of girls. The band, named A-Crush, A for Adonis, A-Crush, formed a year ago, is China's pop music favorite. And these handsome young women remember always dressing up as boys in their childhood. Their lead singer cut her hair at age 10, played sports, and became a competitive fencer. Everyone confused her for a boy, which is exactly what she wanted. She said, in China, the expectation is that girls work in an office and then go home. My parents wanted me to be a stock trader. Well, she now sports a couple of tattoos, does exactly what she wants to do, and most importantly, she is who she wants to be. The youth in China are hungry for exactly that. Last Tuesday, I went to see one of the better-known podcasts called The Moth. Playing to a sellout crowd at Kingsbury Hall, we listened to 5 amazing storytellers. One story, told by a gay man from a small blue-collar town outside of Pittsburgh, was about him finding his own voice. Another story told by a lesbian described her experience of receiving her first kiss by a woman. And a third storyteller offered a fabulous slice of his life, which included a very macho father who rode motorcycles, had guns, and robbed banks. It was quite an hilarious story. But somewhere in his maturation process, he learned of different interpretations of masculinity, that being male could be expressed more tenderly as well. And his story ended when one night his macho dad came to visit. They were sitting in the living room being kind of silent the way men are in their inept socializing. And then the storyteller's 3-year-old son entered the living room dressed as Anna, a princess from the movie Frozen. And the storyteller looked at his father, who was looking at his grandson, the princess, in total disbelief. Nobody said a word, but it was transparently obvious to everyone at that moment of time that our culture was changing. Indeed, we were somehow getting a philosophical fingernail under the edge of the firmly stuck masculinity sticker. And someday it'll be ripped off entirely. And we will all finally be free to express ourselves as we wish.